So the president said that June 12 had established our political liberty.
Yes.
But the current fight now is for the economic liberty of Nigerians.
Certainly.
There's a lot going on in the country economically. We all know if we go by the fuel price, of course, you can link Iran to it, but before Iran, we were at 800, and many Nigerians are not finding it funny. We are talking about gas, gas price. I don't know how much you bought today. The last time I did, it was around 1,800.
Yes, in some areas,
in some areas we hear it's 2,000, and so there's a whole lot going on right now. But how much of economic dividends, as I said earlier, has democracy delivered to Nigerians? Let's find out what and how the country can move forward economically. We have joining us virtually Dr. Olugbenga Adeyemi Adeoye, who is a chartered accountant, tax expert, arbitrator, international business lawyer, and president, Egba Economic Summit Group. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. In our Abuja studios, we have with us the special advisor to the president on economic affairs, Mr. Tokpe Fashua. Good to see you, Mr. Fashua.
And thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. The data shows that the first quarter GDP growth rate of nearly 4%. That is good news for economists. That is good news for, I guess, good news for Nigerians. But the reality, Nigerians will tell you that we are not seeing that growth in our finances, in our economic situation. Tell us how far this current government is trying to do all of the things that it's doing. It says it's delivering for now some difficult times, but that we should look ahead, and the better days are ahead of us. Let's take it the current situation now. Why are we here, and how can we move forward? Mr. Fashua.
Well, thank you very much. The problem is that we sort of, many times we are wired to focus on the negative side of things. I heard you talking about gas prices and petroleum prices, but there are other things that have also improved in the country. Whereas, yes, we agree that gas prices, petroleum prices have gone up, even before the Iran problem, which actually complicated things for us a little bit. But we're getting out of that as well. But in this country, of course, we've seen that minimum wage has increased. The government actually spurred that one to happen from 30,000 to 70,000 in the minimum. And of course, the private sector has also taken a cue. Most people are earning double what they were earning a couple of years back, some triple, some quadruple. That is the truth. So it's working in some areas. It's not, so we tend to, there's nothing wrong actually in projecting only the negative side, or to actually focus on people who are downtrodden and falling by the wayside, because it helps the whole of society to do better. I made a note a couple of days back that in this same country, it also occurred to me that about 6, 7, 8 years ago, even 10 years ago, we were talking about state governments owing salaries, some up to 18 months. Was mentioned specifically, I think I remember Kogi State was one of those, Osun was one of those, quite a few states in the north as well, even in the east of this country. We're owing salaries up to 12 months, some 18 months. Now, what it means when you owe civil servant salaries for that long, I don't know how people survive for 18 months, even for 2 months without their salary. Some of the states also, they were paying half salary for years, half salary. And this was when minimum wage was 18,000, sometimes 30,000 naira. We can talk about the value of money, whether naira is stronger or weaker or whatever. But the point is that there was a time when people were constrained. So there are two things. The federal government of today, under President Tinubu, has come, and today none of the states, 0 states are owing salaries. I mean 0. And that's remarkable. Now, we're not saying that it's a great achievement to be able to pay salaries, but if we compare to when people didn't have anything at all, And, you know, you may say they were civil servants. Not everybody is a civil servant. But I also know many private companies that took a cue at that point in time, and they were owing salaries and making their people suffer, even when some of them, the CEOs, were flying private jets up and down. Secondly, very importantly, what the president has done, he is an advocate of local government autonomy. He has pushed for that. Some of the local governments are getting their money directly. Now, you know, and more of them will do that. In fact, a lot of them are regularizing their papers, submitting you know, mandate forms at central bank and so on. There's going to be a final push. Of course, the governors, they have to manage that situation one way or the other. The truth is that there's a lot of you know, imbalances at that level, that if the governors of some of the states don't continue to support some local government, there'll be a skew. You find out that the very large local governments, where we have had a lot of people moving to those local governments, just like people move to Lagos and leave some of the states. In Abuja here, most people want to be in Amak. Very few people will stay in places like Kwali, like, you know, and all of those places. There's a place called Yaba in this Abuja and so on. So there's not need for that balance. So but what we have seen is that Mr. President's policy has empowered the state governments, it has empowered the local government, and that is where Nigerians live. So I personally don't buy this rhetoric and this narrative that everybody is suffering in Nigeria, there's more suffering. I don't buy it. And I've not seen any empirical research that actually supports that. What I have seen, and what I'm telling you right now, is that I've seen evidence to the extent that people who live in the local government, in the state government, are now having more opportunities as a result of the policies of the federal government. In fact, the federal government, actually, you could say that they have shot themselves in the leg, because it is in the federal government you see that constraint. And everybody is focusing on Tinubu, when in fact he has actually released the power to the local governments and the state governments to do better for their people. So that's the way I look at it.
Let me come in there. Let me stay with you, Mr. Fashua. And to your point of, you know, tripled and quadrupled salaries, and with that comes, you know, the salary increase letters to say, due to the present economic realities in the country, we are pleased to announce the increment of salaries. So it takes people back to square one, because it's because of the increase in goods, of the cost of goods and, you know, services, that salaries are increased. So it's the same thing. You don't have more money, you just have money to spend with the current economic realities. So, I mean, we're back to square one. Yeah,
you're very correct. And you know, it's better to be left at you know, at status quo than to be dragged back. Imagine if those increases in salaries hadn't happened. That means that people will be forced to survive on 3 years, 4 years ago salary, given today's reality, where fuel prices, where the cost of everything is. And in fact, also remember very importantly that Nigeria's economy is 70% informal economy. And the reason why we had inflation, food prices increasing in 2023, 2024 is because everybody increased their prices. Everybody who was selling something increased their prices. Nigeria has 39 million MSMEs. Meaning that people are always selling something, even though, I mean, someone said that we have enough of those, and I think we do have enough of MSMEs, because it's a cry for help anyway. People trying to do something on the side. Many civil servants have small things they're doing on the side. You can't blame them. Everybody is trying to survive. But everybody increased their prices. And in increasing their prices, that means you're getting some more money in. But then again, let's also confuse the fact that there are times when some business models are just not working. The world is changing in very dynamic ways. You know, artificial intelligence is coming up, all sorts of things. Some of the tech companies, biggest tech companies in the world, they've laid off more than 100,000 people around the world in the last 1 month. So we should also expect that some of these things will come into Nigeria. You see a lot of riots in Belfast, see what's going on in South Africa. They're pushing everybody out. Every country is coming under pressure. It's not just in Nigeria, but Nigeria, I think we were lucky that Mr. President actually made the move that he made, because we cannot keep kicking the can down the road and saying that and expecting things to get fixed up. It's not going to happen. We were paying $10 billion in fuel subsidy every year, which disappeared into people's pocket. You heard what former governor of Kwara State, Saraki, who was then Senate President, said yesterday. You know, I mean, non-existent ships collecting money from Nigeria and all of those. So Mr. President said, look, let's walk away from that permanently. And that's why we're here today. Fuel prices are high because we're now tethered strictly to the market forces and the global markets and so on. The problem in Iran, our prayer is that it ends on time because people are dying in those places. It's not in our interest, and of course, it's not as if we're making so much money now because every crude oil is produced on that contract, and Nigeria's part of that is at best 40%, 45% thereabout. So it is good that we have actually made this move, increase that minimum wage, and I am one of those people who will always put the private sector under pressure to say that, look, this minimum wage thing is not just a federal government or state government thing, it's a whole of economy thing. Everybody must do right by their employees, because the employees who collect salary are the most vulnerable in this instance. So once we can do that, then of course we know that some people are at par where they were, and then we now try to fix the vulnerable sector of the economy.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Adeoye. You've heard what Mr. Fasher said. He said he doesn't believe that there's so many people, that are suffering, if I get him right. He needs empirical facts for that. And he mentioned that there is a 70,000 minimum wage, and the president has said that, the structural reforms going on is painful, but, we should just look ahead for better days. What are you seeing, Dr. Adeoye, in Nigeria economically?
Okay, because we are in the era of June 12th. Today is June 13th. So let me just thank God for the life of those who fought for independence, Zik, Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, and those who enhanced democracy, like Obasanjo, who handed over in 1979. May God forgive those who truncated democracy in 1983. And also want to thank General Abdulsalam Abubakar, who willingly handed over in 1999 to Obasanjo. And then we thank the Afenifere, the Nadeco, the people who fought for democracy. Now, let's come back to the issue of 27 years of uninterrupted democracy, whether we have achieved what we need to achieve. We have achieved greatly on the macro side, but on the micro, we have a lot to do. At the initial part of my French speech, he's a chartered accountant, and also he's a very good marketer, and he has a duty to say all that he has said about the country. But one thing that we know is that Mr. President understands what we are going through. I'm going to agree with him on the side of the role of the subnationals. You find out that after the removal of subsidy, there have been increase in federal allocation to state governments, and the infrastructure, we call public infrastructure, that could cushion the effect of inflation was not made available by many states. I was watching what happened at the Lagos Investors Forum, Invest 3.0, and you had Abia State Governor, Imo State Governor, Plateau State Governor, Nasarawa State Governor, and the Lagos State Governor, what they were doing, what they have done so far on power. I tell you, the blame of the current situation in terms of what is happening with prices, we have to shift 70% to subnationals. State governments are not doing what they ought to do. With the volume of money that is made available to our governors, there is no reason why we should not have gone far in having real connection in all the 3 senatorial districts in the respective states. And this is going to bring down prices of transportation. With the liberalization on power generation and distribution, there is nothing stopping state governors to have done a lot with power plants to have electricity available to citizens in their respective states. Now, when you take energy cost, transportation cost out of your cost, then you get better. Investment in farm clusters where you have tomatoes, vegetables, beans, rice, maize being planted in a way that food prices could go down. Most of the governors have not done what they ought to do. Therefore, we shift 70% of the blame to subnationals. They are receiving more money, but where is the money going to? We understand that the money goes to the black market to chase dollars rather than providing needed infrastructure that could cushion the effect of inflation. However, federal government cannot be totally, absorbed from the microeconomic crisis that we have, because even at the 70,000 increase in salaries, like people say jokingly, they say the take home cannot take them home. So we must agree with that. But the take home will have been able to take people home if we have done the needful in terms of infrastructure that provides public goods that brings prices down. Take, for instance, you talk about you don't have electricity in many places, and for that reason, you have to purchase diesel or petrol. Diesel at 1,800. So no matter how much you are earning, you are going to become poor by providing energy for yourself. And if you talk to people that are in hospitality, I happen to be an investor in hospitality, people are making losses. And when that happens, people will close down, and then some people will lose their jobs. So the governors have responsibility to see, what can we do? Can we face the state capital first, face the major city first, and ensure that there is adequate power supply that is affordable by the people? And then you go to rural communities and then subsidize solar panel, inverters, and batteries for them. The federal government cannot do everything alone. Do you have cluster farms? Now you look at people when they apply for farmland to farm. For 1 year, they may not get response from the government. And this is one of the things that can solve our food security problem. When we don't plant, we're not going to have harvest. And when there's no harvest, prices of food will continue to increase.
Wow. A lot to unpack. Mr. Fashua, your comments on that as well, especially because we do know that when salaries are increased, or when we want to ensure that things are the way they used to be, Nigerians are still complaining because a lot of times we say that we're the ones that are our own enemies. When prices are good and market forces are good, sellers refuse to bring down the prices of commodities. Is there any way that the government can help to regularize these things such that, the market forces, when they're in play, they're really in play, and when they go up, it goes up, when it comes down, and everybody's happy at the end of the day?
Yes. Thank you, madam. You asked very, very salient questions. Honestly, I don't know your name, but I wish
my name is
get to know your name, because
Joke Rogers.
Joke, asking very salient questions, because one of our biggest problems in this country is what's called price gouging. When we had the worst of inflation pre-2025, it was because people just wake up and increase their prices. In fact, this morning I bought an item, using WhatsApp, and they had increased the price between 2 days and today by about 20%. And I was asking why? What happened? What changed? But because it's what's called seller's market. Because in the seller's market, and this is where most of Nigeria is what they call seller's market. People use most of their money on food, on transportation, on shelter. Maybe they have to rent a house or build one, and a little bit on social and maybe some clothing on their back. That's what takes all of, and maybe of course school fees for those who have children. That's it. Now the point is that if it depends on the school you're taking your children to. Most of the private schools, they will increase at will, and then you start to argue with them. If you go to the restaurant where you eat tomorrow and they've increased their prices, you still have to eat, and if you get to the bus stop and you're going from Oshodi to Mile 2, is whatever the guy calls it that you're going to enter. Sometimes we argue, but so you have asked a question, what can we do? Because the countries that we sometimes quote are countries that they have gone through all of this in the past, and in a place like United States, which is the headquarters of global capitalism, all of the states have laws against price gouging. During Hurricane Katrina, one guy bought some generators, some generating sets from Kentucky and took it to Louisiana, where they had a problem because they had no light in that state at that time, and increased the prices by 100% times 2. He was arrested and jailed immediately. So you don't just price gouge and increase prices on people. We are getting to that place. The FCCPC is doing a lot to ensure that we get to that point. But I think that the ultimate duty and role belongs to the people. Do not be exploited. Don't wait to be exploited. Okay, because you want to say, oh, well, it's Tinubu's problem. But you're the one paying the price. The people increasing prices when they shouldn't. So we should get to that point where we know that, okay, if the cost of factors reduce your price as well. If you can prove to us that the price of your factors have increased. But if you think that because you can just set the price anyhow and make a kill, because most Nigerians are aspirational, everybody wants to do the 50th remembrance of their great-great-grandfather and spend money. We see the same people we complain about there's no money. We spray money in parties and dance on it, and the government has not been able to even stop that problem in time. But then I want to quickly comment about some of the things that Dr. Adeoye mentioned. The fact is that yes, of course, a lot of the states can do better, but some of the states are doing well, and we can only encourage them. For example, Lagos State, of course, Lagos is almost not a state, but we can see the indices of what they're doing. Lagos is one of the states that's taking initiative. They have a grand plan. Mr. President is part of that plan, and there's that continuity going on. Ogu is not doing too badly in terms of infrastructure. They used to criticize him a lot about the roads in Ota and all, but I was in Ota a couple of months back, and some of those places I realized that okay, some of those roads had come back into action. Equally, Ekiti State, I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I saw some of the things that they have done. If you go to the southeast, governors like Enugu State, Abia State, Imo State, Anambra, even Ebonyi State, some of those guys are doing well. Then you begin to move to the north, and you see things happening in Kano State, in Kaduna State, in Plateau State, and even as far as Adamawa. So before we make some of those statements, please let us be empirical. So let's not dismiss all of them as a whole and say the governors are just changing the money to dollars. It may not be a fair statement. Some of them are really trying. Some of them are. However, like I said, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. One of the things I've also criticized the governors for, and I'm pushing them to do this, to say that the ratio of debt between Nigeria's debt between the federal and state is 93% to 7%. The federal government is carrying 93% of Nigeria's debt. So tomorrow you hear Mr. President wants to build an infrastructure. He has sent a request to the Senate. Nigerians will say, oh, why are we doing this? The point is also that we need to begin to see the states maybe coming together to build infrastructure. For example, Dr. Adeoye mentioned the rail system. I know that the Southwest Development Commission, they are trying to come together to see how, so we want to quickly see how that pans out. We want to see our entire country linked up by rail, but I think that the governors have a great role. Otherwise, we'll be putting too much pressure on the federal. Okay, that's actually the truth and where we sit right now. Nigeria, and again, please, and now the thing is this, that there's no time we're going to see that Nigerians will not complain. There's nowhere they are not complaining in the whole world. As a matter of fact, I say that we have good problems in Nigeria. People who live abroad will tell you that they are under pressure, they feel the impact of the credit system, they feel they're paying too many bills. You know, in Nigeria, we haven't got to that point yet. Sometimes we want to say we want to be like the abroad. Sometimes I tell people, be careful what you ask for, because you may just get it. The kind of stress they face in those places is different from what we face here. You realize that we've been living in almost a paradise in this place. But of course, that's the biggest room in the world, is a room for improvement. We all can do better, and the citizens can do better. We must be very watchful, make sure that nobody is taking advantage of you, you know, and realize that this country has a lot of potential for growth, and we have all actually started growing. We would continue to try and reduce the poverty level of our people, but this is also where we can, every of our people can get the most opportunity, because this is the country where we're from. Like Mr. President said, he said, you can criticize me, but don't run down Nigeria. Criticize me, but understand that Nigeria is your best bet. You can see the people coming, the returnees from South Africa are telling you, see, I see a lot of them complaining about what they've gone through in those places. I tell them, I say, we've always said that Nigeria is the best bet for every Nigerian. At least now we can see it. And every country is becoming xenophobic in their own way. So we must come back to see how we can make our country better, and this country is going to soar. Yes,
certainly Nigeria is our country, and all we want is for it to be better for all of us. One of the issues that Dr. Adeoye mentioned earlier was about power and what some state governments are doing, you know, to address that. And whether you like it or not, power deficit is a major challenge, particularly for local manufacturing, micro, small and medium enterprises having to deal with power issues, and it affects, of course, their bottom line in terms of, you know, their cost of production and what they make of it. What exactly is the federal government doing more to ensure that, you know, this power issue is addressed, because it is critical for economic growth?
All right, thank you very much. I think, you know, in the year 2025, well, two things happened. Let me quickly use this opportunity. In 2025 was the year where we saw a reduction in inflation across the board. Of course, food prices decreased, and many of the farmers were complaining because, you know, food prices decreased, and they complained about importation of rice and I think maize. I think those two were important. The rest was, but what we saw was that 2023, 24, and 25, we had bumper harvest across the farms. As a matter of fact, you know, right now there's still some, I saw online several farms that were harvesting their cassava, or even just leaving them on the farm, and I felt sad because Nigeria is the biggest producer of cassava in the world. I thought that ethanol, you know, producers, you should be harnessing that, and even those who produce the powder they use for pharmaceutical, for tablets and so on. You know, but that said, about power sector, in that same 2025. Nigeria imported 435 billion naira worth of solar panels, and we also exported about 70 billion naira worth of solar to some of the West African countries, and even I thought that one went to Europe. Yeah, so I see that there's a transformation going on in that power sector. The future of power, the future of electricity power is sustainable, is green, is solar. Luckily, Nigeria is sitting on the best area for solar panel in the world. I don't know, and I think that we should take note of that. That where we are, across the equator, this is where we're getting the most solar radiation in the world. We're getting the most. We should actually get to the point where no ray of sun will go unused in this world. I mean, in this country, no ray of sun. Everything be converted to power, and that's where we're moving to. So the federal government is encouraging solar. A lot of the 435 billion naira is importation by federal government, especially under the Rural Electrification Agency, that deploying, and like Dr. Adeoye said, the rural areas they will be sorted with solar and you know, these inverters and so on. That is what will solve the problem at that level. The grid is compromised. The grid has been around. When the British were going, whatever they left for us is either we couldn't handle it, or they also they lost interest in those things, and we saw a scenario where things just kept going down. From the days of the Electricity Company of Nigeria to NEPA to PHCN, now to TCN and DISCOs and GENCOs, we've been seeing a lot of challenges in most part of Nigeria. Infrastructure is compromised. A lot of it is outdated and not well maintained, and there's been a lot of sabotage of the infrastructure of this country, meaning that the idea of national grid is coming under serious jeopardy. The idea that we're going to bring power from Osogbo and distribute to the whole of Nigeria or from Kanji and so on, is becoming a lot less manageable because we're seeing failures. And you cannot continue to fail Nigerians. So therefore, the impact of sustainables is what we are hoping for next. And that has already begun to happen. So of course, private people have also imported a lot of solar power. This will solve problems for small businesses, for businesses that don't need huge energy, maybe like the barbing salon, the hairdresser and co, can be sorted on the basis of solar. And that initial investment can also be subsidized. For those who want, you can always visit the website of REA and approach them and see what kind of package they have that can solve your problem. The state governors are also very much involved in some of that. I'm aware that Ondo State Governor, they are doing quite a bit in terms of solar. If you went to Ondo State now, you see a lot of the streets lighted up, and they're also encouraging people to go down that route. The future of energy, like I said again, in Nigeria will be solar, because we happen to be very lucky to be sitting on where you have the highest solar radiation in the world. The last time I traveled to the UK, right from the airport in Heathrow, I saw advertisements where they put there, say, if you want solar in your house, come and approach government, we're going to subsidize it. And I said, this is the UK where you have raining 80% of the time. If they can do it, that means that Nigeria has a great advantage.
Before I move to Dr. Oguye, Mr. Fashua, is there something you can tell us about the reported Aso Rock moving, from the national grid to solar?
Absolutely, absolutely. The energy bill of Aso Villa would be in the region of maybe 20 billion every year, or something that's ridiculous for that they used to pay to these schools. Now the Aso Villa said, look, we need to walk away from this. What are we doing with our carports and all of those things, and even the Aso Villa clinic and so on? And the Aso Villa moved, and I've been seeing criticisms from people who say, oh, Tinubu has removed himself. When you should be actually telling governments to assist you and in your businesses, in that way, because that is the future of energy. Everybody, even the White House in America has a solar panel there. Everybody should be thinking of efficiency. I see that a lot of our people are still stuck in the idea of I must get energy, I must get electricity from the grid. It's not necessarily so. Innovation is a constant thing in life. And listen, in the year 1999, when General Salam finished his tenure in Nigeria and handed over to the politician, he went back to Mina. And he built his house, his own mansion next to General IBB, and he powered it with solar at that time. And he spent, according to Ovation magazine that time, he spent about 7 million naira, which was a ridiculous amount of money, then maybe $700,000 equivalent at that time. Do you know that what he generated then today, if you have 20 million naira, you will generate the same thing? The price of solar has crashed in the last 10 years by 90%. So it's just waiting for us. It's just like the GSM story. When we were going to go on GSM, we had only 440,000 landlines in Nigeria. And Vodafone was approached to come into Nigeria to produce GSM. Vodafone was the biggest phone company. They commissioned one of the big 4 consulting firms who came to Nigeria and said, no, these people cannot pay for this solar, they cannot pay for GSM, that we cannot have more than 1 million GSM numbers in Nigeria. Vodafone did not come to Nigeria. MTN and Co came. Today, we have 200 million mobile phones in Nigeria. We have one of the densest telephony in the world. In fact, the phone that we have in this country in terms of numbers and usage, they don't have it in Europe. So this is also another opportunity waiting for us on the electricity. I believe that Nigeria will be lighted up big time. Okay, it's going to be a combination of everything, but perhaps the grid will be deployed to assist our industries and the big users. They need the grid, but everybody else should look at, yeah.
As you have pointed out, to have solar installed, you need some good money, and I'm sure you know that the average Nigerian, to be able to gather such money, is this something that the federal government will be willing to invest into for Nigerians? And while we also will be asking the state governments also to look at that, is this something that the federal, because the average Nigerian is not able to install solar panels or with inverters for their homes?
The two things is happening. Yes, you're very correct. Two things are happening. Number one is that the cost of solar is crashing. China alone is producing 2 times of the world's need. In fact, 2 times of the world's annual need is what they produce in China alone. But we also have local companies here that are producing, like there's one called Alleviate by Nzanogbe, that are producing solar panels, and they're also exporting some of those. You heard what I said earlier on, 70 billion export, 435 billion import of solar alone in Nigeria in 2025. And it's still going on. It's getting more efficient. It's getting cheaper, and of course we have a scheme that's also developing at REA along the lines of what I mentioned that they're doing in the UK, where even households can approach government and get their solar panels done and maybe pay over time or something of that sort. States are also encouraged to do that, and I mentioned that Ondo State and a few other states are already doing that, and I say that that's the future of energy. In the north of Nigeria, even in a state like, I think it was Katsina or Jigawa State, that there's a certain solar field, and there are these solar fields that are coming up in different parts of the country. So we're going in that direction. Everybody is taking themselves out, and because we have that advantage that we have good solar radiation in Nigeria, I see that to be our next solution. It's going to happen just the way GSM happened. They thought we couldn't do it. Now we're there. MTN is making 40% of its profits in this country for the last how many years and so on. And I think that this solar, as it's getting better and so on, is the way forward for this country.
Right.
So again, you in the media, you can also encourage the government and the state, local government. Now that local governments are getting their money, remember that the ratio of roads in this country, 18% belongs to federal, another 20% belongs to state, the rest is local government.
Yeah.
In the same vein, some of this kind of responsibility, the local government is where people live. A lot of the money, some of the local governments are getting 500 million every month, some up to $1 billion every month, the big ones in Kano, in Lagos and co. We need to actually pursue them and be sure what they're using that money for. They are the ones that should be put under pressure to begin to solve this problem from the ground up.
Right. And if I come to you, Dr. Adewuye, a lot has been said. Yomi pointed out that, a lot of Nigerians, majority, may not be able to afford these solar systems that, run into at least 1.1 million, 1.5, depending on what you want to do, because it's not just the panels. It comes with the inverters and all the systems that come with it. But with the fact that we say that, the federal government is willing to help out with some of these infrastructure, what kind of advocacy do you think the government needs to do? Because enough people may not know about it for them to plug in. Where do people need to go? How can they access these funds, these fundings, to be able to use solar to power their homes and, some businesses as well?
Okay. Number one, let me address the issue of increase in price that my friend mentioned, that the whole country is the seller's market. No, I do not agree with that. So what the government needs to do to move from seller's market to buyer's market is to open the economy, provide the same level playing ground for businesses so that there can be competition. What you see in Canada, US, and UK, why you get cheaper prices of product in various sectors, is because there are many people that are involved in business activities. So if you want to get an iPhone and the price is too high for you, you go for Samsung. And you are looking for internet package, and then this company is giving you a particular price, then you go to T-Mobile. So if you look at the real estate situation in Lagos today, a client of ours wanted to purchase property at Ikeja GRA. He saw one at a given price, and then while we were pleading with them to accept his offer, the owner declined. This guy moved to about 3 or 4 streets away and found a better property at a cheaper price. And then he went for that and paid. By the time the owner got back to us and was willing to accept that price, the guy has paid somewhere else. So open the economy, allow the same level playing ground, and then you will see competition and prices will crash. Now we have lithium, uranium, and so on in the northern part of Nigeria. What government need to do is to give more leverage to entities. I had the president mention the other day that, look, don't take these minerals from Nigeria and then you go to manufacture battery elsewhere. Do the battery in our country so that prices can go down. Now, intervention funding need to be put in place at the Bank of Industry, and then this facility need to trickle down to microfinance bank, mortgage banks, such that every Nigerian, with or without collateral, will have access to batteries, solar panel, and inverter. Remember, the batteries, the inverter, and the solar panel, they are the asset that you are going to get. So that should be enough as collateral for you. So what government should do is to say, look, before we even share the allocation every month, we're sharing about 1.2 trillion every month. Take 120 billion out of it, that's 10%, send it to the Bank of Industry, divide it into 6. We have 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Southwest take 20 billion, South 20 billion, Southeast, North Central, Northeast, and Northwest. And then this money you now distribute across commercial bank and microfinance bank. Now, there are so many bottlenecks to get facility in the commercial bank. So you bring down to even some fintech too and say, look, solar panel, battery, and inverter for all houses. You cannot afford it, just come over here. And then you subsidize at the federal government level by ensuring that the rate is single digit. When that happens, personally, I have a project that I wanted to install solar panel and inverter. One, they gave me a bill of 90-something million, another 50-something million. Even at my level for business, where I'm a director, I had to pause a little. I was spending a lot on diesel. Now, this is practical. Now, before you now talk about poor, extremely poor people who cannot even afford, to buy petrol and diesel. So if you say, look, we're giving everybody, all household, in certain places, solar panel, battery, and inverter, 10% of the money that goes to state government, we've taken it out from the federation account. We've sent them to Bank of Industry. The Bank of Industry has distributed it down the line. So you go to microfinance bank around you, get your solar panel, get your inverter and the battery, and the installers. So you see job created, the installers will be trained, and then there will be activity. So you have a salon, you have a barber shop, you have small businesses, you're selling soft drinks somewhere. You know that power will no longer be a problem. And by the way, these people, they don't consume much power. Because when I look at the people that lived in my parents' house in the village, I noticed that in the 6 rooms apartment, not all of them have freezer. Maybe only 1 or 2 people have a refrigerator. They do not even have some of the equipment that we have in our various houses. Therefore, solar is just ideal for people at the lower cadre. For industrial, energy, then you talk of gas, piping gas to everybody into the clusters, such that people who are producing will also not increase their prices. So when you pipe gas to them, power plants can then be purchased, and every factory will be able to function effectively. So urgently, intervention fund through Bank of Industry should be provided. And government should not say, oh, we don't have money. Take 10% from FAC before it is distributed and say, look, we are not spending this money at the federal level. We are giving it to Bank of Industry, single digit. You can even say 6%. You can say 5%. Power every household that require this energy. And of course, people were making comment that the president, the Aston Villa, is now on solar. Let me use the popular language in the society. If president can go solar, who you be? You know, so that's leading by example, saying that, look, this cost is too much. And it means that the president and the villa, they are accepting that the cost of energy is too much. Whether you are buying diesel or you are even paying to the Genco and Disco, whosoever. So, solar, green energy is the best way. There is a place we went to in Baltimore in 2012. The entire place is powered by solar. You know, very close to one tractor company there when we went for a agri conference. So we can do it if we make up our mind, but credit must be made available to people. The commercial banks, they are inflating the price because they want to add their interest. The supplier wants to put the profit. What should have cost you 10 million? You end up paying 18 million. So this is the challenge, and federal government need to step in. And state government can do same too through their credit system that they have in their respective states.
All right, thank you. We are winding down now, Mr. Fasua. You'll agree with me that Nigeria, when it comes to revenue, we are still very heavy on dependence on oil, despite having a large and vibrant multi-sector economy. How can we ensure that, you know, production in Nigeria will ramp it up instead of us having to look for foreign currencies to do importation? How can we strengthen our local production, manufacturing here?
Well, thank you very much. You've asked a very important question around our revenue, you know, that you linked it to production. I wanted to quickly respond to Dr. Adeoye on my assertion on sellers market and sellers inflation. I mean, the point is that you know, the sellers market is a scenario where the seller dictates what goes on. He mentioned the case of the property, you know, is ready to buy. That is outside of the seller's market. Indeed, it depends on the situation of the market at that time, but when you're talking about the whole property, you can actually wait and sample the market and so on. The real seller's market is what I mentioned: food, shelter in terms of rental, you know, especially transportation. You want to come from Yanya to town, is whatever the boss man tells you is taking, you know, and that's where we need to actually focus on for our people, you know, in this country, to say, okay, you know what, how can we make life easier? There's a certain professor, you know, in the U.S. who did some Isabella Mayer, I think that's her name, who did some work on that sellers market in 2022 2024. Especially in 2022, when there was a global inflation crisis where inflation in the US and Europe got to as high as 11%, things that they hadn't seen since the Second World War ended. You know, and she said that she realized that a lot of the inflation in the US was as a result of companies trying to meet their profit target, especially on fast-moving consumer goods like cornflakes, like milk, and so on. They wanted to meet their target, and so they set the price in order to meet it, and the people don't have a choice, they have to buy milk. So that's our challenge in this country. We haven't been able to develop the infrastructure that the US has, but that doesn't mean that we will not try.
Mr.
And
Fasua,
things like consumer protection is also one of the issues. But yes, let me quickly mention the issue of revenue. The truth is that what you said actually is a fallacy. Most of our revenue in this country comes from internal sources, but most of our foreign exchange comes from crude oil. Most of the foreign exchange that's available to the federal government to manage the naira comes from crude oil. And most of that, when you see the crude oil that we sell, like I said, 60%, 65% of the money belongs to international oil companies. Sometimes the CBN will say, you can't bring that money back, we want to manage our naira. Sometimes the CBN will say, don't worry, when you sell, take your money and go. It's an illusion. It's an illusion, but majority of the revenue that we make comes from internal sources. The most important revenue source in this country go to NRS, whether in terms of VAT collection, in terms of company income tax, even petroleum profit tax and what have you. That is where the real money comes from in this country. NRS, not the crude oil sales, you know, because most of it is not ours. So in terms of productivity, it's already beginning to improve, especially with the reform on the naira, okay? Productivity is improving. Many people are buying local, many local companies are doing well. Go to Aba, go to Ariara, go and see what those guys are manufacturing. I bought a belt on Broad Street about 6 years ago. It's supposed to be a Ferragamo belt. I bought it for 4,000, 6,000 naira. I still use that belt today. It's what I use almost every day. So Nigerians are now forced, quote and unquote, to purchase local, and local companies are also producing more. And we can see that also beginning to impact even our educational sector, with Coventry University coming to Nigeria, Birmingham working with Unilag, Rugby School is in Lagos, Eco Atlantic, Charterhouse is in Lekki. His college is working with the Abuja Center of Medical Excellence here. We're seeing things beginning to improve and turn around in Nigeria. Give it a year, give it 2 years, you'll be shocked where we will be. But of course, there'll still be poor people, but we cannot always front with the bad news all the time. We have to also acknowledge that some things are improving for a lot of people in this country. Thank you for the platform.
And indeed, you know, it is that improvement, as I said earlier, that Nigerians are looking forward to. Dr. Adeoye, quickly, let me have your final thoughts on the program this morning. What do we need to do to ramp up our economy?
Well, the government needs to be sincere, and the people also need to be sincere with ourselves. Credit system need to be improved upon. When people have credit at single digits, they'll be able to do what they will ordinarily not be able to do. And then we need to reduce the cost of governance so that more money can be available for infrastructure. States will do a lot better if they can reduce their cost of governance. I think that's, just in a nutshell, what we can do.
Thank you indeed for your time this morning and your insights. Dr. Olugbenga Adeoye, Chartered Accountant, tax expert, international business lawyer, President Egba Economic Summit Group. Thank you indeed for your time this morning. And the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters, Mr. Tokpe Fashwa. Thank you for joining us too.
Thank you.
Right. And when we return, we'll be taking a look at yet another infrastructure issue. This time, the congestion at the Apapa Port Complex here in Lagos State and the traffic issues it has thrown up yet again.